Hi, Josh. I had to laugh when I was looking at this because it seems like your luck was getting worse and worse because you could see the cars moving, like different spots. As the day goes on, like different spots have different cars in them. And it's like the vehicles between you and the building are getting bigger and bigger as the day goes on. Like in the beginning of the day, they were smaller vehicles parked over there, and then they just got gigantic. It's like all SUVs. So I had to laugh. Your luck just got worse and worse as the day went on. So and this was a problem for a lot of people, actually. When you're using your meter in incident reader mode, if you hold the meter just right in front of the camera, what you're metering is actually the space you're in. What you wanted to do in this case, like I said, a lot of people made the same mistake, is go walk up to your subject and go meter in different light quality on your subject. Like here, for instance, you've got, like here you've got deep shadow, and here there's a little bit of direct light. It's directional, but there's some direct light, coming onto your subject. So you would have taken a meter reading here, made a note of your exposure settings, taken a meter reading here, made a note of your exposure settings. And then you would have decided if you wanted to prioritize to shoot the shadows or prioritize to shoot the highlights. Or, if you wanted to compromise and just choose something right directly in between your two different set of exposure values. You would have found that you had a difference of so many stops, say like 5 different stops of exposure, and you would have chose something like 2.5 stops in between. But mostly, you really needed to just go and hold your meter in incident mode right up against the building and facing it directly back toward the camera on your tripod. If you didn't feel safe leaving your tripod there, you would have just faced it back toward where you intended to have your camera on your tripod. So I hope that makes sense. A lot of people are making this mistake, but when you just hold the meter right in front of you, you're metering the light falling onto just that spot. You want to actually meter the light. Excuse me. Okay, sorry about that. I don't know where I was, so I'm just going to move on. I think I just talked a lot about metering, so we're done there. Hopefully you get it. You need to actually go up to your subject and meter your subject, and then so composition. So ideally, for these shots, folks would have visited their building when there would be less visual obstruction between wherever it is that they set up their equipment and the building. This, and I get it that it's not always possible to get out and about at those times, depending on your personal responsibilities. So let's ignore this. And just let it be known that if this was a shoot for a client, your client would not be happy with that. So let's talk about composition. And then let's talk about, I don't know which of your 3 that you submitted you intended to be your 2 finals. There's 2 finals required for this class. So compositionally, this one and this one are essentially the same. So we'll just talk about one. So let's just talk about this one arbitrarily. And so when you're shooting a building, typically you want to make sure that the top of the building and the bottom of the building are parallel with the frame of your image. So we can see here, you can see that this building is clearly not parallel with the top of the frame of the image. And unless that's like extremely intentional, it's somewhat visually disturbing. Disturbing is a strong word, but people pick up on it, and they don't. And if it's not obvious that was a creative intention of the photographer, it just doesn't read well. So watch for things like that. And also, again, it's difficult to find spots and the right focal length lens to use, but watch for things between you and your subject like this. Now, I get that this isn't directly between you and your subject, however, it's so gosh darn close that it feels like it is. And then this line here, lining up to just pointing directly to the building makes it feel even more so like it's directly between you and the building. So right now, between you and the building, we've got a whole bunch of cars and a lamppost. And then the building is kind of just not slanted enough to feel intentional. The lighting on the building, however, is lovely. I think that these soft curves around those pilasters is just really doing a nice job describing that building. And then like this really elegant glowy edge there of that right there and right here of the sun kind of bouncing back and reflecting back onto itself, onto the building is really nice. So the lighting is beautiful. The composition, though, needs a lot of work. Okay, and then here's your other composition. And so in this one here, obviously, that's not supposed to be parallel. So that makes a lot of sense for us. And then you're using a really short focal length lens. There's a lot of barrel distortion here, but it makes sense to do that to shoot a large building. So this works out really well for us, I think. I think this could have been cropped a little bit differently in the viewfinder. I'm not really sure how. You would have had to maybe just change your point of view and moved a little bit more to camera right. But this stuff right here is just, it's not present enough in the image to be anything but a little bit problematic. And then again, we have all these cars. Now, I know you would have probably had to visit this building before dawn to not have cars, and I don't know what this building is, so maybe then wouldn't have even worked. Is this the building from Back to the Future? Because that looks like the Just kidding. And then there's like, you know, for this shot, there's a lot of negative space here. You know, maybe that entire tree is perhaps not very useful to us or to the scene. So again, the lighting is lovely, and the composition is okay, but I think it's the framing, you know, exactly what we're looking at through the viewfinder that's not so ideal. Maybe something a little bit more on the lines of this, with not such a tangent angle like that you would have to raise it a little bit. Okay, so let's just do that again. Something more along the lines of something like this, you know, would have felt a lot more natural. So I hope that makes sense. So we need to work on how we use our meter in incident mode out on location. Remember, you need to hold it right up against your subject in the quality of light that you're shooting in. And if there's multiple types of light on your subject, you've really got to meter all of them and then either come up with a compromise or decide which one you're going to prioritize. And then also really be careful with your viewfinder. Really pay attention to the angles that you see, because it's a big deal for a client and for a viewer if these angles don't really line up very well and it's not obviously intentional. It just seems like it seems unconsidered. And that's really my big feedback for you here today. Thanks again for fixing the file size. These are so much nicer to look at when nothing's pixelated. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much, Josh.